When I first started this documentary, I just wanted to learn about the village I came from, Fenstanton, a village in Cambridgeshire which has loads of history. From being the birthplace of John Howland, a prominent member of the crew that travelled to America on the Mayflower, to the ghost stories told by the locals of the village. Throughout this process, I discovered the writings of Gertrude Peat, a local historian that lived in the village in the later parts of her life, until her unfortunate death in 1941, and was instrumental in creating the wealth of information that we have today. I also discovered that besides her research, Gertrude Peat lived an interesting life, full of hardships and struggles. Despite this, for all her life she kept writing about local history. Much of this research has been used by John Deeks, a modern local historian in his own writing, and was a source of information for me when I first began my research into the village. This is the story of Gerty, and her influence into the historical preservation of Fenstanton's past.
Well, my name's John Deeks, and I've lived in Fenstanton village for 40 years. And my main hobby for most of my adult life was family history. But about 12 years ago, it was pointed out to me that Fenstanton had an amazing history. So I started looking into it, and I found out it does have an amazing history. So for the last 12 years, I've been writing an essay in the village magazine. They're all now bound into books and been distributed. I've also looked into ghost stories and also traditions and sayings in the village, and they are now in a book as well. I first heard of Gertrude from Jack Dady's book on Fenstanton, History of Fenstanton. Jack Dady wrote a book back in the 90s, did a lot of research, and it's actually quite a good book. And in Jack's book, he mentions Gertrude Peat, or Gerty as she was known, and I found out that all her paperwork was at the Norris Museum in St Ives. So I went and had a look and found some amazing stuff there. Jack had actually rejected her work and said it wasn't worth looking at, which I found very strange because it's amazing what's there. Could not have produced the work I produced without her. And everything I did that was based on her work, I gave her credit for, always gave her credit for.
The vast history of Fenstanton village is still shared today, through individuals like John Deeks, who regularly take time from their busy lives to read through and write down the stories of the past. Gerty has been incredibly influential to the modern research into the village, sharing stories of both the time she was alive and the times from before. She has allowed an insight into the past that without her, we never would have been able to enjoy. The dedication she had into historical research is fundamental to the preservation of the history of small communities and rural areas.
Gertrude Peat was an amazing lady. She was an alumni for Cambridge University, so she had access to all the libraries at the university. She made great use of those and wrote prolifically. Now, she was born in 1871 in Bedfordshire. Her father was a Baptist preacher. Eventually, they moved to Fenstanton and they moved into the manor house, which is quite a place. And he died in 1916, leaving the house to Gertrude. She was, by all accounts, a very, very attractive, if not beautiful woman, with piercing blue eyes. Someone wrote about her, who knew her very well, that she was very sophisticated and was well in with the local gentry. And at one time, again, this was written down, that she went to a dinner and she was on the top table, the only lady on the top table with all these gentlemen, and she more than held her own with them. It is rumoured, and it is only a rumour, a story, that she was due to marry someone from the aristocracy, but got rejected at the altar. So she remained a spinster for the rest of her life.
The young woman that Gertrude Peat once was is characterised as a strong-willed, beautiful woman, who is incredibly popular with the bachelors of the village. But as we all do, she suffered hardships later into her life, becoming someone much different, but still equally as willful as she once was. She suffered a lot, but became someone else who was uniquely strong and capable in comparison to who she was, becoming a well-known individual in the village, dedicated to her interests and work.
She changed character after that. And not only did she own the manor house, but she owned a row of cottages down Hall Green Lane. And she used to maintain those cottages herself. So she was quite often seen in the village with a ladder and men's trousers, which were, well, in fact, were illegal at that time. And she'd wear a trilby hat and she'd be up on the roof and she would repair and she'd dig holes and repair drains. She was quite a character. Someone else wrote that every Tuesday and Thursday, I think it was 2 days a week anyway, she would get on her bike and she would cycle all the way into Cambridge to do her research. And then she would cycle all the way back again. Now, Cambridge, 10 miles at least, on not the roads that we've got today. So that was quite something. So she was obviously very physically fit, which she had to be if she was looking after her own properties. But unfortunately for her, she developed rheumatoid arthritis. So as she grew older, she became less able to do these things. And there is one lady in the village who's in her late 80s who I've spoken to, who remembers her when this lady was a child. She said we used to see her hobbling down to the shop. She'd have a walking stick in one hand and she would hold on to a fence or a hedge on the other. And she said it was very sad. She said also, sadly, some of the children in the village used to take the mickey out of her. That's children for you. In 1939, when war was imminent, the government took over a lot of houses, big houses around the country, because they knew that they were going to have to enlarge the Women's Land Army. So they took over the manor house. They paid her, I think it was £12 a year for rent. And they took over the Congregational Manse, which is opposite. And between those two, the Land Army girls were billeted and fed and looked after. So poor old Gertrude had to move out of her lovely house, the manor house, and she moved into a cottage in Tall's Lane. She was there from 1939, from the time the war started in 1939, until she died the following in 1941.
Gerty passed away not long before her 71st birthday in 1941. She lived a long life for someone living in the time she did, an incredibly multifaceted person who changed greatly throughout the time she was alive, becoming a stronger person in the face of great difficulties. Her legacy lives on in the articles, books and essays she wrote, still available for those with an interest in the subject she wrote about, kept safe within a local museum, and regularly discussed, paraphrased, cited, and shared by people like John Deeks, who carry the same curiosity about the small village of Fenstanton and the areas around it. She spent a lot of time sharing stories of other people's lives, so I hope I was able to give her the same treatment and share her story.